In this lecture, I'd like us to introduce the study of logic. There's an important reason why philosophers turn their attention to logic, so we'll take a look at a few things. First, we'll look at what logic is. Afterwards, we'll look at logic from a bird's eye view. And then finally, from there, we'll see why logic is so important. And so let's get started. The clearest way to understand what we mean by logic is by thinking about common opinions regarding what it is. So for example, it's commonly thought that logic teaches us how to reason. We might also say that logic helps us create arguments, and these seem true. But there's something odd worth noticing. When we learn something, don't we already need to know how to reason? We can't learn anything without using our reason or rationality in the first place. So, in order to learn things at school, for example, we need reason. But this raises a weird problem. If we need to reason about things in order to learn and understand, then how is it possible to learn logic? Let me put it this way. If logic teaches us how to reason, but in order to learn logic, we already need to know how to reason, then doesn't that mean we all already know logic? Why do we need to learn logic if everyone already knows it? So what's going on here? Learning logic is like playing an instrument. Anyone can sit at a piano and press keys. Or again, anyone can grab a guitar and strum the strings. But not everyone can do it artfully. There's an art in how one presses the keys on a piano. A pianist doesn't just press keys, he presses them artfully, in a way that plays music. Similarly, the guitarist doesn't just strum strings, he needs to know how to tune the guitar and strum it artfully in order to play music. In a similar way, anyone can reason, just as anyone can press keys on a piano or strum strings on a guitar. But not everyone can reason artfully. We don't learn logic in order to learn how to reason, because everyone can reason. Rather, we learn logic in order to reason artfully, to reason in a way that is orderly, easy, and, this one may seem bold, without error. And so what is logic? Logic is the art of reason, whereby art we mean a definite and fixed procedure established by reason. Through logic, we reason about the way we reason. The fact that we can reason artfully tells us something interesting about ourselves. Science tells us, for example, that we are animals, and this seems true enough. Animals are living things that can sense, and we humans are living things that sense. So, naturally, we're animals. That makes sense. But we aren't just any kind of animal. We are rational animals. We are animals that can reason. And not just reason, but reason artfully. Now, suppose someone were to disagree with this. Lots of philosophers actually do disagree and think that human beings are not rational animals. But there's something really funny about that. Some philosophers try to give rational arguments in order to prove that we human beings are not rational. But if human beings are not rational, then those philosophers would need to give an argument that is not rational. But if their argument isn't rational, then we have no reason to believe them. Of course, there can be a real debate about how interconnected rationality is with what we are. But we at least cannot say that humans are not rational animals, because then we contradict ourselves. We'd be trying to reason our way into rejecting reason, which just doesn't make sense. And so granting that we human beings are animals that can reason artfully, we have to consider what it means to be rational. And to do this, we have to pay attention to ourselves, to the activities we are engaging in right here and right now. By being attentive to our own selves, we gain self-knowledge. So we are asking what it means to be rational. When we ask, what does it mean to be rational, we are asking for the definition or whatness of rationality. This means that to be rational includes grasping definitions, grasping what things are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking what it means to be rational in the first place. And so, through grasping what things are, we come to understand them. But we don't just grasp definitions. We also try to judge whether those definitions adequately or inadequately apply. For example, if I say that rationality is when you fly in the sky, you judge that to be a bad definition. It doesn't express what we mean by rationality. It would be false to say that rationality means flying in a sky. So, not only does being rational entail that we understand what things are, but it also entails that we judge things as either true or false. We use reason to help us figure out what's true or false and what's right or wrong. And so far then, we know that to be rational includes understanding what things are and also judging things as true or false or as right or wrong. But we don't just judge things as true or false. We also want to know why those judgments are true or false. So, for example, in geometry, we may have learned about the Pythagorean theorem, that given any right-angled triangle, the square on the hypotenuse is equal to the squares on the remaining sides. That in any right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We learned this in school. But how do we know that this is true? For example, why doesn't a squared plus b squared equal c to the fourth? In asking, how do we know that this is true, we are asking for why the Pythagorean theorem is true. We are asking for the reason why. Grasping the reason why something is true is the act of reasoning. It gives us the why for our judgments. So, in short, to be rational means to understand, judge, and reason about things. These are the three activities of the mind. Now, there does seem to be an ordering to these operations of the mind. Understanding seems to come before judging, and judging comes before reasoning. We can think of it this way. Let's take judging first. When we judge something, we judge it as either true or false. For example, we can judge the view that humans are gargantuas as either true or false. And we seem to know what humans are, at least well enough, I should say. But what in the world is a gargantua? I don't know what that is. So are humans gargantuas? I'm not sure. If I only knew what a gargantua was, I'd be able to say, yes, human beings are gargantuas, or no, human beings are not gargantuas. But since I don't know what a gargantua is, I have no clue whether human beings are gargantuas. So what this shows us is that if we want to judge things rightly, we have to make sure that we understand those things first. We shouldn't judge something that we don't understand, because then we can easily make mistakes. We should only judge things we do understand, and be open toward those things that we don't understand yet. So understanding then comes before judging. But what about reasoning? Reasoning is the process where we take known judgments in order to discover an unknown judgment. So for example, we said we know that human beings are animals because animals are living things that can sense, and we human beings sense things. The reason why human beings are animals is because we know two judgments to be true. First, that to be an animal means to be a living thing that can sense. And secondly, that we human beings can sense. When we put these two judgments together, we reason about them. These two judgments give birth to a third judgment, which we call a conclusion. So the conclusion the thing our reasoning arrives at is a judgment. But the process of having those two judgments give birth to that third judgment is what we call reasoning. Those two judgments are the reasons why the conclusion is true. When it comes to the reasoning process, then, there are two basic kinds of reasoning. There is what we call inductive reasoning, and there is deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning reasons from particular premises to a more general or universal conclusion. So, for example, I am mortal. You are mortal. He is mortal. She is mortal. And you, me, he, and she are human beings. From this, we reason to the conclusion that human beings are mortal. This conclusion is reached through induction. It begins from particular cases and reasons to a general or universal conclusion. But we can also reason deductively. Deductive reasoning reasons from at least one general or universal premise to a particular conclusion. For example, all human beings are mortal, and I am a human being. Therefore, I am mortal. This is known deductively. Now, when it comes to inductive and deductive reasoning, it's worth stating that the form or structure of inductive reasoning only gives us probability, not certainty. The fact that 4, 5, 10, or even 8 million human beings are mortal does not necessitate that every single human being is mortal. Now, on the other hand, deductive reasoning, when correct, does give us certainty. It allows us to be completely certain that something is true or false. For example, it is certain that if all human beings are mortal, and if I am a human being, then it must be the case that I am mortal. So induction yields probability through its form, while deduction can yield certainty. Now, earlier we said that it is through the art of reasoning that we can reason without error. So how do we do this? How do we reason without error? First, we have to use deductive arguments, because deductive arguments are certain, not probable. Second, there are things to keep in mind regarding deductive arguments that can help us reason without error. A deductive argument succeeds in proving its conclusion to be true if 3 conditions are met. These are the 3 checkpoints, so to speak, of any deductive argument. So the first checkpoint is that all the terms must be clear and unambiguous. We have to understand what all the terms mean. If a term is unclear or ambiguous, we have to define it more clearly so that we can understand it. This is because, again, we should not judge something to be true or false if we don't yet understand it. By having clear terms, we can make sure that we understand what is being said. If our terms are not clear, 2 parties to the argument, for example, may think they're talking about the same thing, when in reality they may be just talking past each other. So the first condition for a good argument is that all the terms must be clear and unambiguous. The second condition is that all the premises must be true. You can seemingly prove anything with false premises. For example, all birds fly by flapping their wings, and I am a bird. Therefore, I fly by flapping my wings. The conclusion, I fly by flapping my wings, does follow, but the premises are false. So the argument is not a good argument. In order for an argument to be a good argument, we have to have true premises. Having true premises is the second condition for a good deductive argument. The third and final condition for a good deductive argument is that the argument must logically follow. It must be logically valid. An argument is logically valid if the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. so that if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true also. For example, if all human beings are mortal, and if I am a human being, then it necessarily follows that I am mortal. That's a valid argument. So what does this mean for us in philosophy? Why does this matter? This matters because we all have beliefs. All of us believe something. Some of our beliefs are true, while others may be false. It is through philosophy that we can evaluate those beliefs so that we can believe what's true and discard what's false. It also protects us from being deceived. Some people can try to manipulate reasoning. They can use reasoning in manipulative ways, which we call fallacies. And they do this in order to trick us into believing something false. But by learning the art of reasoning, we can protect ourselves from those bad arguments. It is really through logic, then, that we can distinguish between opinion and knowledge. Anyone can have an opinion about anything. This is most clearly seen in social media, for example. So anyone can have an opinion, but not everyone has knowledge. In our study of philosophy, our goal is not to find opinions. Our goal is to discover truth and knowledge. Of course, that does not mean that opinions are meaningless or bad. They actually play an important role in philosophy. But the end goal is not to have opinion. The end goal is to have knowledge. This is why our focus in philosophy is not just the study of arguments or thinkers of the past. Those are important, but they don't give us the full picture. Philosophy is also concerned with each of us as individuals. Abstract concepts don't have opinions and knowledge. We individual human beings do. So philosophy is ultimately meant to be transformational. Think of it like how, to use an analogy, we are all like blocks of marble. Blocks of marble need to be chiseled in order to become something artful and beautiful, in order to become a statue. Logic is like that chiseling tool. We will have to face our own beliefs and come to terms with them. And this isn't always an easy process. It can be painful. But that chiseling process is going to be the thing that forms our character from a blob into something more defined, into a work of art. So there are ultimately going to be three things that we need to pay attention to in our study of philosophy. First, the object, such as the content we learn. Second, the subject, namely we ourselves. And finally, the activities we engage in as we study philosophy. This threefold focus will give us a holistic view of philosophy and, in turn, will provide us with a holistic view of self-knowledge. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.